It's Tuesday, the 12th of July. It's a little after 10 here on the East Coast of the United States. Hope everyone has had a good couple of days. Um, just a reminder, as it's Tuesday, it's the last day for groups to post their work to the Module 2 forums. Looks like 1+ group has done that work so far. I'll comment on their work, but ideally I'd like the opportunity, and your colleagues as well would like the opportunity for the rest of you who haven't posted yet, to comment um, in the next, say, 24 hours or so. Because Wednesday, and for those of you in Asia, Wednesday is sooner than it is here in the States. Wednesday we start on Module 3, which is the internally assessed components. So if you're still haven't posted, now's the time to go ahead and do it. So I'll walk you through the just learning engagement 1 for this video, and then make comments on the other ones in subsequent videos, and I'll post those in the appropriate discussion forums. So let's get started. I think the first thing to say is that, in general, the comments that were put up by everyone in learning engagement 1 are, on the one hand, very common. So you're making, and that's a good thing. In the sense that you're making the connections between the philosophical or the approach to the assessments, and seeing the ways that Glopo can be compared and contrasted against history and philosophy and TOK and econ. That's exactly the sort of work that you should be doing. So well done there. In addition, I think that the discussion, and particularly I'll focus on Dale's discussion, because that was the one that gained the most traction. So well done, Dale, for starting us off and getting 17 replies in 3 or 4 days on your topic. But in general, this is exactly the sort of approach that you should be taking. The idea here is, again, for you to see what you already have experience in your existing teaching practice, even if it's not in IB. I know a couple of you haven't been teaching in the diploma program, but seeing the connections with what you already do and how you can take what you already know and apply it to, or synthesize it with, the existing program in Glopo. And that process of learning is exactly the sort of thing that you want to obviously model for your students as well. Take what they know, even if it's very, very little, but find ways for them to connect to the syllabus content, the concepts, the theoretical perspectives. That approach ties in with obviously the ATL, but really it creates that impactful learning. So I'm going to jump into Dale's post and use that as the basis for discussion for this module. And for those of you who haven't read it, please go and read it. It's entitled IB History, TOK, and Economics, discussion of paper number 1. So Dale, I think that you're right to make you're right in your comparison and contrast between the assessment objectives within both of these group 3 subjects. They're obviously going to overlap because it's group 3, but they're obviously going to be different. And in particular, just to give you some background, when this was first constructed, it was written by the folks who write history, and they were even marking some of the sample student work that we were getting from either the pilot school in Egypt or other places around the world. And to be frank, there was a little bit of trouble. Trouble maybe is not the right word, but there was a disconnect between what the folks assessing history were looking for, and what we as the Glopo team, excuse me, were looking for in terms of the type of assessment, the quality of the work, the conceptual focus. So there was a little bit of growing pains, which in my mind is the hallmark of a good course. This is not just simply a replication of existing group 3s. It's not cookie cutter in that way. So I hope you all are finding that, and as you walk through the learning activity and read those things thoroughly, you should be again revisiting the guide and getting into the guide, because that's really the basis for everything that you do. That ability to read that guide, which is substantive, is going to help you through as you go to teach in at most 2 months time. So I like the idea, and in fact, your summary, Dale. This idea. There's no explicit evaluation of sources for values and limitations. Um, yeah, I think that's perhaps the biggest thing, and in the difference in Glopo and the evaluation, or the synthesis and evaluation AO3, which is where the OPVL pops in history. That synthesis and evaluation is used to make an argument, particularly in question 3 and question 4 of paper 1. So it's not that the values and limitations aren't included, it's just done differently. So students are often asked to weigh um, the preponderance of evidence. Um, and frankly, the variety of evidence the students can use, I think, is much broader than can be done in history, even on paper 1. Um, so much so that I think it creates a different sort of, I'm not saying it's necessarily better, although I personally think it's better, but I don't think that objectively it's a better way to go. I think far too often students have looked at values limitations and sort of developed a pedantic or mechanical way of saying, well, the source is written by a white male, and so therefore, and that's not, or it's within history, historical contingency matters. In politics, it may matter, and I think there's a different in perhaps epistemological approach, or if you make the broader connection, the difference between human sciences and TOK as an area of knowledge, and history as an area of knowledge. So they're on equal footing. They're just different. So you're right to highlight that. I think that's the good piece. So that led to a whole litany of discussion, which was fantastic. Lee, I think that your compare and contrast with colors is excellent, especially with the new curriculum coming online with history, to show the differences and similarities between the two subjects. For those of you who are familiar with the new history syllabus, yeah, it's a good way to think about the differences, particularly if you're teaching both. I've taught both in the past. I know many folks may be teaching history and Glopo, and understand the difference when it comes to the assessment piece. I think is crucial. Um, Malika, your comparison with econ as well, I think works very, very well in highlighting the the differences, particularly in econ, when there is a more explicit focus on theory. Whereas in Glopo, theory is used, but it's always through application and synthesis. And you don't have to tick all the boxes. So for example, in a question 4 of paper 1 response, or in paper 2, students can adopt contrasting or two competing theoretical perspectives, but they don't have to run through all of them. So if you wanted to take a realist approach to a question on humanitarian intervention, and then take a constructivist or critical theorist approach, or if you wanted to take a feminist approach, those two would be able to demonstrate multiple perspectives. You don't have to walk through the realism and varieties of realism, liberalism, varieties of liberalism, engage in epistemological concerns around either rational choice or constructivism, or you get my point. Whereas econ, as I understand it, it's a bit more focused on, you've got to include these particular theories. I think in Glopo, the effort has been in the different ways that we've pulled in from social sciences, particularly international relations, but not exclusively, from economics to some extent, from anthropology and cultural studies. There is this goal that theory operates at a bit higher level of abstraction. And so that's why the theoretical perspectives are used in such a way in Glopo responses, that it's not a matter of just of saying, well, this theory says this. You can, frankly, you can do very, very well from an atheoretical position. In students can do well from an atheoretical position. Maybe that's the best way. It's one way of looking at the world, but you can certainly adopt it just through even the lenses of, say, gender and identity and class, absent of theory as well. So yeah, Lee's also gone through and taken put paper 2 in there. I don't have to rehash that as well. What my point for all of this is that I think that um, the way in which you've gone about the discussion really is a fantastic model, and I hope again, and I've advised you all of this, advised all of you to do this in the past. Make sure that you're saving these discussions. Um, Saving these discussions, because these will be things that you can come back to in the end of the, or not just at the end of the workshop, but as you teach the course and roll it out. Randy, I'm curious about your comments. Um, I've read it, a couple times that the idea of comparing TOK. Um, the only thing, maybe from the assessment perspective, maybe it's because and just for those of you who didn't read, so, Randy wrote that, I do teach TOK, however, and I have for 4 years now, I don't see any comparisons in this thread. I think the comparisons lie, or the similarities lie for TOK and global politics, in the extent to which students can develop a holistic argument that draws on multiple perspectives. So it's question 4 in paper 1. It's the entirety of paper 2 when we look at that, and maybe those comments pop up in the other 2 forums. But in response to a TOK essay, some of them are rather specific. So discuss a prompt with reference to 2 areas of knowledge, but the level of abstraction is there. So you'd be hard pressed, for example, to say that a good TOK essay shouldn't include as many ways of knowing as possible. So and particularly, and then the student not only should be able to identify and describe the ways in which those ways of knowing are being used, but to be able to compare and contrast and to use those ways of knowing as a way to make sense of phenomena as well as to construct an argument. Well, that's the same way that concepts are used in global politics. So power, for example, is applicable to anything. You can always find a discussion of, you can always use power to address a particular prompt, particularly, again, that question 4 in paper 1 or anything in paper 2. But the ways in which power manifests itself, if you look at the syllabus, the varieties of power, the limitations of power, and then the examples, of course, in the world outside the classroom. When, to what extent is military power even possible to be used by states and non-state actors? Whether you bring in auxiliary theories of willingness and opportunity, or the fungibility of force, or the limits on the use of hard power, and this sort of new understanding or newer understanding of soft power, or from a constructivist perspective, the power of language and the power of zeitgeist at any particular point in time. My point is that the WOKs and TOK and the concepts in Glopo can be used in similar fashion in the responses. And then the same thing when it comes to areas of knowledge. That's where, again, taking theoretical perspectives or taking holistic understandings of broader concepts or a broader phenomena, say like R2P, because we're talking about humanitarian intervention here in the model. They're not identical, but they are different ways of approaching this. So again, you'd want to examine a claim on personal knowledge through the lens of, say, history, social sciences, and, say, art, right? Triangulate that way of thinking. Well, you could easily do that way of, you could look at humanitarian intervention from a realist, liberalist, and constructivist perspective, if we're going to take those 3. So the analogs are there with Glopo and TOK, and I hope I've explained it to at least a little bit. So, all right, I'm running now 15 minutes, which is way more time than you probably wanted to listen to me speak. But well done on this this module for those who participated, and this discussion in particular. So started by Dale and I'll post this video and put some other ones up in the next couple hours. So, okay, thanks.